I'm Caroline. I'm an HCA student. I am a mum of two and a dog. Recently divorced. I am originally from Sweden, but I have been in the UK for 25 years now. So I feel like a local. I help mums rehab from childbirth. So I use a little bit of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and personal training. And then last year, I just felt that I wanted to just broaden my studies further, go deeper into nutrition and stress management and work even more holistically with mothers. So I then found the HCA course. If I look back now, I think it was very clear that I had ADHD. I had 20 different jobs in the space of 20 years. I studied, I worked as a journalist. I went into financial services sales, sustainability marketing, charity fundraising, and then eventually I set up my own company 5 years ago. But I think I got a diagnosis a year and a half ago. At the time, I was looking into ADHD for my daughter, for my oldest daughter. And as I was learning about it, I'm like, oh my God, but this is me. I clearly have ADHD. And I think if you're going for a diagnosis, you probably already know that you have it. It was very obvious to me. I mean, there are two variants. My daughter has the inattentive ADHD, and then I have the hyperactive one, which is the sort of impatient, impulsive, going at 200 miles per hour, crashing and burning type of variant.
And you mentioned diagnosis. What was that actual process? How did you initiate it and what happened?
Because I was sort of looking into diagnosis for my daughter, when I realized the waiting times were 3 to 4 years, I just thought, well, I don't have that amount of time. It was really important for me to know so I could better support my daughter as well as myself. So I went private, had it done privately. That was quite quick. And then there is something called Right to Choose now in the UK, at least, so that they're helping the NHS reduce the waiting times. A lot of GPs aren't aware of this. A lot of people aren't aware of it, but there is a way of having an assessment and also then medication, should you want that, with shorter waiting times, but it may not be available in all of England. You receive some questionnaires beforehand. They ask someone who knows you well to fill out some questionnaires, and then it's a 2-hour session. They just drill down into these questions. They look back at your entire life. So what can I'm nearly 48 now, so I have a lot of symptoms of the perimenopause. So for example, if you have inattentive ADHD, the symptoms of the perimenopause are incredibly similar: anxiety, problems sleeping, brain fog, poor memory. But what they do is they go back to when you were a child. So for example, I have a bit of perimenopause symptoms, but because I didn't have any inattentive symptoms as a child, I don't have inattentive ADHD. But the hyperactivity, the impatience, impulsivity, I've had my entire life. So they go through from childhood. What are your struggles? What was your behavior like? They look at childhood through adulthood, and the problems have to have persisted throughout. It's not something that comes and goes. I know that in the perimenopause, of course, the symptoms are going to become more severe, partly because of dopamine and how estrogen helps to make dopamine. We can talk a bit more about that later. It was such a mixed bag of emotions, and I think anyone with a late diagnosis would probably feel the same. So I think initially there was relief. It's like, oh my God, I know why there's something wrong with me. My entire life I had felt completely different, like I didn't fit in. I would have the highest of highs, lowest of lows. Sometimes I thought I was bipolar, which is even worse than ADHD. On some days I could be very witty and vivacious, and people would be drawn to that. On other days I'd either be very quiet and withdrawn or very impatient and explosive, and people would just back off. And I think I just never knew, well, who's going to show up today? Is it the Caroline that people like, or is it the other one that people don't like? So I think there was a relief in knowing that, well, I'm not a bad person, I'm not dysfunctional, I'm not crazy. There's a reason why my brain works very differently. I think there was a little bit of sadness because I thought, oh my God, I have ADHD. I'm stuck with this for the rest of my life. You can't outgrow ADHD. You have it from birth. You have it for the rest of your life. So there was a little bit of sadness initially, but I've worked through that since. And then there was a bit of anger. I think it was like, well, why should my life be such a struggle? Why is life so unfair? Why was I born with this? I think quite a while, year and a half, but in varying degrees. I think what happened was I started reading lots of books, and then I found an amazing women's well-being series online with someone called Kate Moore-Youssef, and she does so much for the ADHD community. I think I listened to that all of last summer, and it was very enlightening and empowering. And that was just what I needed. I needed more information, but I also wanted to feel empowered and not judged, but just sort of, I wanted to learn, well, how can I work with my ADHD? So I think that was helpful. I read a book called Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate. A lot of people don't like that book because I guess he doesn't put the blame on the family, but he does raise awareness that ADHD will be more pronounced in a chaotic, stressful, insensitive household. And that makes sense, right? When you have ADHD, you're highly sensitive. Your nervous system is so easily overloaded. So it makes sense to me that if you have, you know, challenges in the household, maybe your ADHD comes out more strongly. It doesn't cause it, but it's like a gene, turning a gene on and off almost, isn't it? Or just bringing it out. So I like that book. A lot of people don't like it. For me, it was really important to go, hang on here. If I want to create a better household for my family, for me, for my daughter, I need to really make sure we have a calm, supportive house and environment. And just looking at school environments and other environments, where do we need to change things? Yeah, I read it a year ago last summer, and it was the turning point for me. And then I started learning more and more and more, and I just went from being a victim and powerless to actually really empowered, and then started taking control of my ADHD.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's really helpful, I think, for others to hear, kind of moving from that place of feeling like a victim to, like you've just said, empowered. So that real feeling of hope.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And I think, you know, you have to put the time and energy and effort in. You know, I have kind of dived head first because that's what I do anyway. Like, I am very curious. I like to learn. So I've tried to use that to my advantage.
Yeah.
You know, just reading books, listening podcasts, doing an ADHD coaching course, you know, just doing the HCA course, just always learning more. Having ADHD therapy was really helpful as well. You know, I kind of went, okay, I'm going to use all the tools that I have, plus some new ones, and really get to the other side of this. So, I mean, I've exercised and spent time in the great outdoors every day since I was 4 years old. So that was kind of, I guess, just an intuitive understanding that I just needed to go for a run. I needed to just be amongst horses or in nature, trees, water, etc. And then what it helped to do is just tone down this internal restlessness. There's something called an internal hyperarousal. And most people don't notice it in girls. In boys, because they externalize their ADHD quite a lot, you might just see that excess energy climbing walls or running around, throwing things. With girls, because we internalize all that sort of, it's like a full balloon inside of you. It's about to explode at any minute, but we internalize it. So the exercise and spending time just in a calming kind of natural environment or swimming, it would just take the edge off so I could function in a neurotypical world. That I still use to this day. It's kind of my best ADHD medication. But it did really, I mean, with the internalizing, it just means that girls mask a lot. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of perfectionist behaviors. And some of these overlap into a little bit of autism as well. There's some overlap in symptoms, but that I've used, obviously, like I always also noticed that, you know, spending time with good friends, having those deep, meaningful conversations. Most people with ADHD don't do small talk. We just do deep, meaningful conversations, or not at all. So just being mindful of that, and always creating environments where I get that deep connection, because then I feel seen and heard and validated, and I feel good. I do lots of journaling, meditation, yoga. Eating well is really important. I've always eaten fairly well, but I think in my 40s it became very clear that so the problem with ADHD is if you have too much sugar, you're going to get such a high that you almost feel bipolar. And then when you get a crash, you might become suicidal. And I'm not saying this lightly. It's just that there's such extreme emotions. You're already dealing with a roller coaster inside of you. So if you add too much sugar, too much alcohol, any stimulant, too much coffee, you might just get those extremes. So I think I've been very mindful of keeping an eye on my sugar intake, whether that's alcohol or sugar, caffeine, you know. HRT. So I went on HRT a year ago. So when I first got the diagnosis, I thought, let's use all the knowledge I have in nutrition, sleep, exercise, connection. Let's use all that first, stress management. Then I went on HRT. Then I took some more supplements, omega-3, lion's mane, magnesium, zinc, things that are meant to improve your ADHD a little bit. And then I sort of went, okay, You know, about a month ago, I thought, okay, I've improved my ADHD the natural way as much as I can. What else do I need? So now I'm on a small dose of medication. I've noticed no difference at the moment, but I know I'm on a very low dose. But I think what's been interesting is there was an ADHD medication shortage, and there still is. And a lot of people I know panicked because they only had the ADHD medication in their toolbox. There was one tool. And I think for me, it's like, well, I have 30 tools in my toolbox and my medication is the last one. So if there's a shortage, I still have all my other things. And that's been quite important for me to not depend on some little pill. It's like, no, I still need all these other things. You know, my sleep hygiene is incredibly strict. So I can actually, because, you know, just to calm down and get a good night's sleep. So I'm not wired, but tired, which is very common with ADHD.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it plays into absolutely everything that we do as health coaches, doesn't it? Helping our clients, whether they're neurodivergent or not, you know, kind of have these really good lifestyle habits.
Exactly. And I think just when you've got ADHD, you just need all those habits even more than a neurotypical person. So I think your health is like the biggest thing if you have ADHD. But I turned to NLP, neuro linguistic programming, back in 2018. I'd had 2 serious bouts of postnatal depression. And my mind was all over the place. And I was like, God, I need to sort out my mind. And then I found NLP. And for me, it's like I use NLP on myself. I use it with some of my clients, but I use it on myself every day, really reframing those intrusive negative thoughts and like turning them around and noticing how I'm feeling, how I'm acting, reacting. NLP is very powerful and very pairs very well with health coaching, especially when it comes to that rejection sensitive dysphoria. I use NLP to get out of RSD on a daily basis because I get RSD about 10 times a day.
Let's talk about RSD now, because it's such a key area. And just before we recorded this, you were telling me about a psychiatrist you'd been to see who had never heard of the term.
Yeah. So there's something called the DSM-5, which is a big diagnostic manual for diagnosing ADHD. And RSD is just not it's not one of the symptoms. DSM-5 lags a bit behind, doesn't it? The current kind of thinking and the current research. So it's interesting that when you go to psychiatrists, they only use the DSM-5. They don't use anything else. So, you know, the psychiatrist had not even heard of it. And I was explaining that RSD is the most debilitating symptom that my daughter is having. And you haven't even heard of it. You couldn't even pronounce it. And that's tough, right? Because I'm trying to get medication and asking, will this tone down the RSD? Will it just help it a little bit? Or will the RSD still come on like a tsunami? And that's tough. But I think what's really helpful for me, what I forgot to mention, Attitude magazine in the US, they are amazing. They have access to the latest research. For some reason, the US seems to be ahead of us on this. Amazing medical doctors, and they write articles, they're free articles and blogs, and they have a weekly webinar covering every aspect of ADHD. They talk about RSD a lot, and they cover autism as well. And I think it's been so good to have them as a resource. And I will then go to my psychiatrist and say, well, these are the symptoms. What medication, if any, will help with this? And no, I'm not going to just let you just give me the thing you give everyone else. I want you to explain to me, will this help with this symptom? Because if not, well, then I don't really need it. So RSD it's a really heightened reaction to any form of criticism, or real or perceived. It could just be I'm walking down the street and my neighbor doesn't say hello to me, and I think, oh my God, she doesn't like me anymore. Well, I will never say hello to her again. Or if a friend doesn't reply, you know, to a message, or sometimes it can be real rejection. It could be some criticism, but even if it's real, the reaction is such an overreaction, you know, even if it could just be like you're just overreacting big time. And what it creates inside is this horrible feeling that you just want to run away and never see that person again. So at the live event, the HCA event, you know, I had mentioned to Lynn that I think HCA could do with building in some more movement into their live events and into their sessions, because it's such an important pillar of health. And I felt that I'd said that in quite a constructive, sort of positive way. And then, you know, a few minutes later, sort of Lynn just brushed past me without even making eye contact. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I must have offended her now. And I nearly just left the conference then and there. And just thought, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't need HCA. I'm going to go. And then I thought, hang on, take a few deep breaths. Hello, this is your RSD, you know, go up to Lynn, bring, get some courage, walk up to Lynn and just apologize. So I did apologize. But I guess the point is, whether it was true or not, that maybe I had offended Lynn, but I don't think I had. But even if I had, I guess the point is that the reaction it caused in me, that feeling that I'm leaving, I'm going to go now, I'm just going to run away. And that's how strong the feeling is of rejection, having offended someone or someone just being unhappy with me. That's the kind of level of sensitivity of the nervous system. And I think, but this is where NLP is quite important, because NLP can come in and go, hang on here, you're distorting, you're generalizing, you're deleting information, you're just seeing this through a very narrow lens. Hang on here. So I just go, well, is there another side to this story rather than my narrow view? And it's like, well, Lynn is super busy. She's got over 100 students. She's running around. She's helping out with PowerPoint slides or sorting out this. She's just very busy. It's okay. This isn't about me. This is about, she was very busy in that moment. But that's how I have to coach myself out of it. But the feeling still came on. I can't stop the wave from coming, and I feel horrendous. I want to run away. I'm like, I'm never seeing any of these people again. I'm going to go. But if you think about that, and the fact that I get that 10 times a day, I have run away on plenty of occasions. I've left people, an ex-boyfriend in Australia had to catch a plane back by himself. I've volunteer project in Tanzania when I was just getting, I just walked away, didn't even say goodbye after 4 months of working with these people. Like I've walked away from friendships, relationships. This has ruined so many job opportunities, friendships, and relationships over the last, 4 to 6 years. And now I'm trying to stop, breathe. Is there another path? Is there another side to the story? Can you bring in an NLP? But it takes a lot of work. And apparently the medication doesn't quite help with that.
Caroline, I got a real sort of tingle as you were saying that. And I was thinking as well about the physiological impact, the flood of adrenaline, the stress hormones that must happen when it occurs.
Adrenaline and cortisol through the roof. I mean, I feel like tightening in my chest, heart racing, hands getting all sweaty. I'm ready to fight, but usually run away. Well, a fight or flight, right? So the initial feeling is to run away. If I'm cornered in that situation, I will fight. And then I might become verbally aggressive, and I will usually have an argument. And because a lot of people just think, well, hang on, what happened to that fun-loving, witty, vivacious person? She's just turned into a monster just like that. A lot of people are really afraid of that. They don't understand it. So then it just ruins a lot of friendships and relationships. That's a really tough one. I think maybe my point about medication, I think what the medication does do, because it increases dopamine in the brain, you'll be able to regulate the emotions a little bit better. So maybe you can manage the RSD a little bit better, but it doesn't stop the wave from coming, from what I understand.
Would you say, therefore, that RSD is one of the most challenging elements of ADHD for you, or
by far. Because the rest I can manage, the impatience, the impulsivity, the hyperactivity, I can exercise, I can eat well, I can make sure I spend lots of time in nature, and I have downtime in my day to just down-regulate. But RSD could just be something very simple. Or, even someone just jumping the queue at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
I get so offended, get so angry, I could have an argument with them then and there. But can you imagine? Road rage is a big one as well. A lot of people with ADHD have road rage. Same thing, impatience, impulsivity, and then the unfairness of it all. There's a real strong sense of justice when it comes to ADHD and autism as well. And that's a tough one, because if something isn't fair, I get so angry. So it's a combination of RSD, fairness, they all feed into each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, by far the most debilitating one.
So we've talked a lot about the challenges of ADHD and what it means for you, how it shows up, but there are things that you really appreciate about ADHD. You mentioned the highest of highs and as well. So tell us some of the great things.
Oh my God. I mean, I think I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of passion. I'm very curious. I learn really fast. I am super brave. I moved to Australia when I was 18 on my own. I've lived in Tanzania. I moved to Argentina. I lived there for a few years. I've traveled all over the world. I have changed jobs 20 times, right? I've worked in every industry, like I mentioned, and I'm setting up my own business. I think if you have ADHD, you are brave, you have energy and passion, and you have ideas. So setting up your own business then makes a lot of sense. It's super overwhelming to have to do all these things, all these different tasks every day. But yeah, I think when I think about, maybe I wouldn't have my bravery, my passion, my energy, and my sensitivity. I mean, with clients, I'm super sensitive, and that just means that they trust me. They feel like they can share things. I listen well. You know, I'm empathetic, and I think that's a real skill. It's really valuable as a coach, but in life as well.
For sure, for
So
sure.
there's loads of positives. I think it's just about kind of, how can I harness the positives without burning out? Because what can happen is, I mean, I guess with the energy, I've always hyper focused. I never realized that hyper focusing is maybe not a great thing. So with ADHD, you have a first and a fifth gear. It's a car. That's how I've always thought about it. You either procrastinate or you hyper focus and get 2 days work done in 2 hours. But the problem is, if you hyper focus for too long a period without an adequate rest and recovery, you're going to burn out. So that happened to me last year. I had my own business, things were going well, but I was doing everything myself, working crazy hours, saying yes to every client, and then I burnt out. So that, I think that's really important with, well, I guess both if you have a client with ADHD, but also if you're a coach or you have your own business, it's like there is a tendency to hyper focus, especially if you're interested in something or there's a deadline. Remember, ADHD brain is dopamine driven. So whereas if you're neurotypical, you'll be drawn to importance, what's important, what needs doing. With ADHD, it's like, no. I'm just driven by what's interesting. So if it interests me, I'll just launch into it, sign up to another course, read another book because I'm so interested in it. But obviously there's like another list of things that need doing that are more urgent and more important. But yeah, I just being aware of that if you play too much to your strengths, you have to then make sure that you're balancing that out with enough downtime, because otherwise you might burn out, especially in your 40s. You might be okay in your 20s and 30s, still got plenty of estrogen to power you through, but in your 40s, so estrogen helps to make dopamine in the brain, and dopamine is the main neurotransmitter that we're lacking. So when estrogen goes like that in your 40s, well, then your dopamine is going to go like that. So you won't have the same amount of energy, but you've also got to be careful then that you can burn out. I always think of it, though, there are other feel-good hormones that are important. We don't talk about them as much when it comes to ADHD, but your serotonin, your oxytocin. I always think of, when I think about dopamine, I think, well, increase your serotonin, increase your oxytocin, as well as the dopamine. So it's really important looking at what gives me that. I cuddle with my dog, sitting in the sunshine, having a cup of tea in the sun in the garden, or phoning a friend, listening to my favorite music. Exercise, obviously, good nourishing food, like really looking at giving someone a hug, all those things are good for someone with ADHD because it downregulates the nervous system and fills them with happy hormones.
Which links really well to the rewards tool that we teach about in Pillar 3, doesn't it? It can be really small things, but have such a beneficial impact on us. Like you mentioned, the hug, or, being with a pet or something. So enabling our clients to be aware of those and the power that they have as well.
Yeah, because they're always going to be seeking dopamine. And I think, especially if you're coaching someone with ADHD, just being aware that all these addictions, sugar addictions, phone addiction, alcohol, risk-taking behavior, they're going to be even stronger in someone with ADHD because of that dopamine, forever chasing dopamine. So it's good to be aware of that. Maybe they're struggling to cut down on sugar.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you also know that that's going to be even more important, because they're going to get the high and they're going to get that low, and that's going to be really tough for them.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Just before we move on to talk about coaching and coaching those who are neurodivergent, can we just talk briefly about executive function? Because I know this is something that you've really looked at for yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting with sort of medication and I guess eating well and exercising is that it will help you, but it doesn't necessarily teach you the skills that you are lacking. So the executive functions are kind of the CEO of your brain, is in the prefrontal cortex, and we know that those with ADHD have a 30% delay in those skills. There's things like problem solving, memory, self-regulation, self-awareness, impulsivity. And I think a lot of neurotypical people take those skills for granted. They just, they're organized and they get places on time and they remember their appointments. But because we're lacking those functions, even if you're on medication or eating well, you don't just magically get those skills overnight. So you need to be trained in how to use them. And I think what's really good is that they can be taught, they can be improved upon. And sometimes it's just about learning that something that works for a neurotypical brain may not work for you. So for example, with ADHD, you know, I need a visual system. I need one centralized system. I can't have too many apps or too many notifications because it just doesn't work with the ADHD brain. So I think learning about those skills, well, how can I problem solve? With ADHD, it's like, well, I want to get from A to Z now. You think of something, you're like, well, I want to get to Z. It's like, I don't want to do step B, C, D, E. They're really boring and tedious, and I'm impulsive, I'm impatient, I want to make things happen. And it's like, well, no, but we need to go A, B, C, D, E, and you'll get to Z. But I think helping someone who's neurodiverse to break that down, and it's like, well, we call it almost turning a marathon into sprint. How can you turn those into little mini sprints so you'll get to Z, the end of the marathon, but do them as little sprints, set little goals, sub actions, because then you'll get the dopamine as well, but also it's not so overwhelming. I think that overwhelm is real, you know, going, oh, I want to do this, but I have no idea how to do it, so I'm not going to get started. It's classic ADHD. And I think that's where a good coach can be like, right, how do we break this down?
Yeah.
You know, what's the next action? How can you just do that one action? No more, just do that one. Don't look at the end goal because you'll get overwhelmed.
Yeah, and that links to something you said earlier about healthy eating. And a recent client of mine, this was a case in point, really, where she wanted to eat better, but cooking just completely overwhelmed her, which I take for granted, you know. And so we really had to go back to basics. And actually, what she came up with was she was just going to create salads to take to work. And, you know, that was really doable for her. So I think being aware, like you said, of things that neurotypical people might just do naturally. We can't assume anything with a client in front of us.
I love that you mentioned cooking, because cooking is just, for me, it's like, oh my God, it requires planning, which is
Right.
another executive function skill. It requires thinking ahead, not being in the moment, and you need to go to the shop and or order all those ingredients, and then you got to put it all together in the right sequence. I mean, cooking is my worst nightmare. And I think that, yeah, the planning aspect of it, but we all want to eat well. Like I want to eat really well, but the whole process is so neurotypical. So I think, yeah, if you can help someone break it down and make it easy for them. Body doubling is a nice one too, and that's why I think coaching works so well. Someone with ADHD just might need someone sitting next to them, or like we're doing on Zoom, just to help them stay focused and not get distracted by more exciting things that are again the dopamine, you know.
Yeah, so these co-working sort of things, either online or in person, they might
Yeah,
be really helpful for people then.
might work really, really well. Because we can get there, but it's just like the brain isn't wired to sit through step 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, oh my God, no, I just want to get to step 10 now, yesterday, you know.
Yeah, and thanks to you and other students who I've spoken with, we've made changes to our course, you know, breaking it down and having like the little confetti and other dopamine hits.
Hello, dopamine hit. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
breaking them down into smaller sections so that you feel like you're getting the dopamine each time you've done a section. Whereas if there's a massive, I mean, if there's a massive module with 40, 50 lessons, you like, you see that and you think, oh my God, 40 lessons, I will never get through this. And then you may not do it at all.
yeah. And I remember you
Yeah.
mentioning to me that you need to know how long a video is going to be, so you know
Yeah.
how much attention you're going to have to give that.
Yeah. So that's been quite interesting, because with the shorter videos, I did really well. And then when the videos got longer, 25 minutes, I really struggled. I thought, okay, what do I need? Let me just go up and stand and do some exercise for 10 minutes, take the edge off, take that internal restlessness off, or just tone it down. And then, okay, right now I'm going to go and sit and do this. But sometimes I still break those up into 2 sections. I find it really hard to concentrate for 25 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why
So
the monthly coaching clinics are quite challenging.
okay, interesting.
Yeah, the 90
And
minutes is like the very limit of
yeah.
of how much, you know, concentration I can have in
Yeah.
at one time.
So linking it back to coaching then, thinking about things like the Pomodoro technique, you know, where you set a timer and it's just for the set period, you know that you've only got to focus for that, and then there's an
Yeah.
end to it. And again, linking rewards to something that you're doing, as we will often do. So all of these areas where we can really support clients then.
Yeah, I think there's so much we can do, and there's so many simple things. You know, we don't need big complicated fixes, but it's little tweaks. that make difference. And I think as well, if you're coaching someone with ADHD, they may change their goal every week, every session, because something nice, new and shiny have just sparked their interest. And you might just gently go, no, I know this goal is important to you. We talked about this. Let's break it down. Or how can we maybe change the wording of it? Or what is it that's, why are you drawn to this other thing? I think you can really help them with accountability.
Yeah. Whereas my brother often laughs to himself, he's like, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel.
Yeah, but it's that, right? It's just a squirrel, because I think I read, there was a great quote I read the other day, that ADHD is not a problem of focus. It's a problem of not being able to shut out, what do you call it? Shut out, I can't remember the quote now, but you can't block out the other conversations that are going around you. It's not that you can't focus on this one, but you're just listening to the other 30 conversations around you.
Yeah.
So you can focus, but you just need a bit of peace and quiet. So open plan office, I look back at some of my corporate jobs now, open plan offices, sales calls, and I think, oh my God, that was my worst nightmare. That makes sense. I could hear every conversation around me. I could never concentrate on what the client was saying.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are so many small things that make a huge difference. I know also sometimes if we're doing a Zoom, if there's a lot of chats, a lot of comments in the chat box, it's incredibly distracting and disruptive if you have ADHD, because you lose focus and then you have to bring it back. You need a lot of then effort to bring it back, the attention back to the main topic.
Yeah. So thinking about the workplace, for many people, reasonable adjustments. I think we've talked about a few there, like even working from home certain days might be really helpful for people to get away from that, kind of very sensory stimulating environment.
Yeah, because I think I think just today's world is overstimulating as it is. I think with too many notifications on phones, and we're just on 24/7, most of us. And I think that's exhausting if you're neurodiverse, because remember, you're sensing and feeling everything just 100 times more. So by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I'm just drained. So I think if you can work from home, if you can do maybe some of those calls from home, and you can concentrate, and then you can do other things when you're in the office, maybe have a few face-to-face meetings, or even doing some admin and putting your headphones on, whatever it is. But I think adjustments are needed. I left a lot of jobs because I burnt out, because I wasn't getting enough downtime. And this is a long time ago now. And then obviously, finally, I realized that if I have my own business, I can give myself the time that I need. But that, I think that is still, and that's still a bit of recalibration on a daily basis, because I still think, well, I have a ton of energy, I'm passionate, I want to do all these things. It's like, yes, but you're nearly 48, you have ADHD, highly perimenopausal. It's okay, just you can do that tomorrow. There's a feeling of like, I want to do everything now, but it's like, you can do everything, but not at the same time. So it's like, okay, I have a 2-year planner now on my wall, and I just put down ideas for that. So I can do in 6 months, this I'll do in 2 years, this I'll do in 3 months. And I just kind of, whenever something comes to mind, I put it there. And I also use like a whiteboard in different colors. So colors are really helpful sometimes, just to kind of important stuff in red, obviously. Things I want to do but are not urgent right now, I'll put them here. I'll come back to them so I don't forget them. But all these little things help.
Yeah, really practical tip. Thank you for that.
Really.
We've covered so much, Caroline. Let's just kind of pull it all together, if we may, and think about, our coaches who are, kind of training right now, and they might be thinking, gosh, I'm a bit nervous. There's so much about this that I don't know. I need to go off and read books, do courses. What would your advice be to them about working with somebody who's neurodivergent?
I don't think they need to read any books or do any courses. If they do that, it's amazing. That they will have a greater understanding. But I think if they are a good coach, i.e., they are sensitive, they listen, they seek first to understand and be understood. They really tune into their client. They watch their body language, all the things that you would do anyway if you're a great coach. You just need to do that. Coach the person in front of you. It's good to be aware of RSD. So if you've maybe used maybe if you've used the right choice of words, remember they are sensitive. So if they shut down or become, anxious, maybe think about, what did I just say? What words did I use? Could that have been interpreted as a criticism? So be a bit mindful, but you would be like that with a neurotypical client, wouldn't you? Because you are a coach. By your very nature, you're a caring, you're a good person. So it's like, just bring your best coaching to it. Yeah, sure, do a course, read up on RSD. That will make you an even better coach. But I don't think you need that to be able to coach someone who's neurodiverse. I think you just need to be the best coach you can be. Be kind, listen well, be sensitive, be mindful that they feel everything very strongly. If you get it wrong, have a conversation about it. Did
Lovely.
I offend you there, or how did that land with you? Just gently, just talk to them.
Yeah. And what you mentioned there about body language, observing that and say, I noticed there
Yeah,
was a shift in you there, Tim,
yeah,
can you tell me what was going on? Yeah.
yeah. I
Perfect.
mean, I had that with my own ADHD coach. She picked up on that I just had started shutting down, but it was very subtle.
Mm.
But there was my RSD was triggered, and then we talked about it, and then we moved on. I think the good thing with RSD is it comes on strongly, but it can dissipate as well quite quickly. Some of it can last, a little while, but most of them, they go away, they come and they go. But I think if we just avoid it, if we don't, it's almost like the elephant in the room. I think sometimes you've got to address it, because if we don't, then that feeling lingers within us. And then it's an unresolved RSD, which can then fester. And I think with ADHD, a lot of people with ADHD have problems with friendships and relationships. A lot of them are divorced. It's interesting. I'm going through a divorce, right? And one of the main reasons, my husband and I are very good friends with each other, and we're a good team. But I am highly neurodiverse. I'm very sensitive. I need a certain environment at home so I can function in this very busy London world that I live in. And I think we'll just have two separate houses now, and that's okay. He can have it his way, I can have it my way. But I think, yeah, I mean, most people I know who have ADHD have gone through a divorce or a breakup, because it causes RSD causes so many problems in relationships. That high sensitivity, like quite needy, it can be quite challenging probably to live with. But if you get them right, they're going to be the most amazing person. I know my husband would always say, "Oh my God, you're so passionate, you're so brave, you have so much energy." But then obviously you're so bloody highly sensitive, and can you not just be a bit chilled and a bit less highly strung? And that's the other side of it, right? You can come across as quite highly strung. It's like, well, no, I'm not highly strung. Well, I am, but I'm also just very sensitive to a certain comment or a certain look. Or
Yeah. So it's reframing it, the vocab as well,
reframing.
and the way we talk to ourselves about those things.
Yeah, but that's a really big one, right? Because I think with ADHD, it's like, oh my God, am I dysfunctional? Am I crazy? Am I a bad person? And I think like having to then undo decades of those thoughts, about yourself. And that for me, that's been the hardest one of all. And that's why it's still, if you have an early diagnosis, you don't have as many years of this. But now it's like that negative self-talk. I have to catch myself the whole time. I mean, and that self-compassion book by Kristen Neff is great. And it's really helped me, that and NLP, and going, no, I'm going to speak kindly to myself. And that is just my ADHD, and that's okay. I can work through this. I have all the tools. Take a few breaths, phone a good friend.
Right. And I think it's a lovely place to finish, actually, talking about self-compassion, because actually that has to be at the foundation of everything. Otherwise, all of these healthy habits that we're trying to support our clients with just won't stick, will they?
They won't stick, right? I think you have to really become your own best friend. And I think when that happens, and then that just calms the nervous system. And again, like we saw, that the nervous system can just be so overstimulated so easily. So I think when we're kind, you're like, oh, okay, I can give myself a little bit of self-havening, give myself a hug. And I think I realize that now, because sometimes it's like, okay, what do I need? Well, I just need a bit of yoga, or I just need to listen to my favorite music or play my guitar. I really try and tune in. What do I need? What do I need right now? Can I give that to myself? And just so that self-soothing is really important. And then we can really teach our clients to do that, because I think we tell our clients, but then if we're not doing it ourselves, are we really embodying it? I think that's really important. But with ADHD, I think the biggest thing for me for a while was like, oh my God, I'm just not fulfilling my full potential. I am actually really smart. I have lots of ideas. I have so much energy, but I'm ruining so much, and I think so that was maybe partly where that sadness came from, right? Like really that not fulfilling my full potential. But I think that's where the self-compassion is so important, and going, it's okay. When you know better, do better. And you know more now, and do things differently now. And I still have, a lifetime hopefully ahead of me to live differently. And feel differently, think differently. Say if you're neurodiverse yourself and you run your own business as a coach, be careful with that risk of burning out. Delegate if you can. It took me too long to learn this lesson. It took me 5 years of being an entrepreneur before I decided to outsource a couple of parts of my business. I've just done it literally in the last month or two. Outsource, delegate where you can. Watch out for burnout, hyper-focusing burnout, and just watch out for RSD at networking events and social media posts, because that's where the RSD can be incredibly, just if no one likes your posts or no one talks to you at a networking event, that can be really triggering. So just be mindful of those things and attend. I limit a little bit the amount of networking I do. I love one-on-one networking, so I do much more of that rather than big events where I feel very overwhelmed. And I'm just about now to start outsourcing some of my social media posts. And then I've got someone to do a new website for me. So I think just, delegate where you can, find one good system that works. Be careful of the RSD at networking events, and then you just nourish yourself with lots of self-compassion and all the other things we talked about.
Great stuff.
Final words of wisdom.
Thank you, Karen.
hard-earned wisdom.
Yes, hard-earned wisdom, but thank you for sharing it so that others don't have to go through perhaps.
Don't do what I did for 5 years. Please don't do that. Learn that lesson, please. Just listen to the last minute of this call.